on an all-new Dr. Phil.
I formed a relationship with one of the world's most evil serial killers.
Describe him as a father figure.
He says he fights his urges.
I started to collect replica human faces.
But could he,
You pulled a knife on your sister Jennifer.
one day,
There was literally blood all over the floor.
be a serial killer?
I did go searching for a streetwalker to take at least part of her home, the head.
Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today's going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you. I want you to imagine if police investigators or psychologists had the opportunity to interview a serial killer before they committed their first gruesome act of murder. Well, according to my first guest, I may be doing just that. John says he has always loved looking at gory crime scene photos, collecting pictures of dead corpses, and even dreaming of one day meeting a serial killer. He says he took pride in people fearing him. When he was 12 years old, he says he remembers feeling disturbing urges to torture, dismember, and kill. He says these urges grew stronger. Take a look.
There's a possibility I could snap and become something absolutely evil. When I was 12 years old, there was a friend of mine. We were sitting in the lunchroom, and I just spontaneously started to choke him, and a surge of power came over me. When I was 15, I would create my own death scene photos, just out of people in magazines. I would smear blood on them. I just recently started to recollect replica human faces. When I was around 25, there was this prostitute walking the streets of East Boston. I had a few drinks, decided to go out and see if I could find her. I brought a bag with me, so in my mind, it was logical to take her head back home with me, but I never ran into her. At one point, a quasi-friend came over. I didn't entirely like him, so I put some sleeping pills into his drink and shackled him to the bed. I had bought handcuffs and leg irons, so I would shackle their feet and cuff them to the headboard. When I saw that he was frightened, I actually got a bit of sadistic enjoyment out of it. I just let him complain for about a half an hour before I decided to get off the couch and unshackle him. I'm not completely out of control, but there is that fear in the back of my mind that someday these demons are going to surface and I'm not going to be able to get rid of them.
Well, John says that he has his deadly thoughts under control, but when he consumes alcohol, a hellish criminal is unleashed, and even he's afraid of what could happen.
When I drink, I definitely shed my nice guy. The boogeyman is what's left. There was a period of 2 years straight where I was taking 340 opioid pills a month on top of other rum and vodka. When I was under the influence of these substances, I would black out and self-mutilate. Be generally very scary. In April of 2011, the only serious girlfriend I ever had, I held a knife to her throat, according to the police report, because she had ordered the wrong type of Chinese food. She took out a restraining order against me. I've probably had at least 6 or 7 restraining orders put on me. I've been committed and put in lockdown facilities at least 6 times that I can recall, endless emergency department visits. I have had periods of up to a year where I took sobriety very seriously. The problem is I've never been able to fully maintain my sobriety, and that scares me because I know what lurks within myself.
Okay, John, let's just get right to this. So you believe that when you drink, this demon inside you, this urge inside you to actually kill someone can be unleashed?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay, exactly. So you believe, so it's there?
It's still there. It's always beneath the surface.
there are some behaviors that you've identified yourself as being hurtful, questionable. You say you've hurt friends. You've strangled, stabbed, shackled, drugged friends across your life.
Yes, sir, yes.
You say that you've chewed your own forearms, that you shave them in order to do that, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
You were in the military.
I was in the military Marine boot camp for
Right.
a couple of months, and the stress got to me, and I engaged in what I call auto-cannibalism, essentially.
Right, so what were you doing? You describe what you were doing when you say chewing your own forearms.
Yes, I was under extreme stress, and so I resorted to actually biting on my forearms and marking them up pretty terribly at the time.
Were you taking chunks out of them or biting them? Or
Small chunks, we'll say, yes, yes. Okay. And I was definitely a few deep bite marks.
Yeah.
Yes.
The chunks you got out, did you chew them up or spit them out?
I recall probably swallowing them, I would say. And
so you were eating your own flesh?
Yes, it was, like I say, a case of auto-cannibalism.
Yeah. And you said you drank blood.
Right, yes.
Where'd you get the blood?
That was a mutual arrangement with a friend of mine, and it was a ritual drinking of blood.
And how did they get the blood to give you?
We sliced each other with razor blades.
And drained blood into a...
And we basically spilled some blood into our cocktails and basically smeared it on each other in a ritual fashion.
Uh-huh. Man or woman?
Man.
Uh-huh. And you have a sister.
Yes, sir.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, yes.
And you've painted stick figures with Jennifer's blood.
I have in the past.
Where did you get her blood?
That was a spontaneous nosebleed in that case.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you've had thoughts of friends disappearing and a prostitute's head, beheading a prostitute, right?
Yes, these thoughts have come into my mind.
Okay. You choked your ex and threatened to decapitate.
That was the case, yes.
In fact, you said, I know how to do this. You told her, I know how to cut a head off.
Yeah, I made that clear at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your objective in telling her that?
There's no logic to it. It was insanity.
Did you want to scare her?
But,
or you
partly, yes. And I remember also, according to the police report, that because she had ordered the wrong Chinese food, and obviously that's not logical. So.
Yeah. Were you drunk?
Yes, and blackout point.
Now, you've pulled a knife on your sister, Jennifer, and was this when she was holding her child?
I believe she was holding her child at the time to protect the child, I suppose. Not that I was any threat to the baby, but that's how she perceived it. I mean,
she says you had a Crocodile Dundee type knife, and you had her and the child cornered, and she had to talk you down.
She did have to talk me down, and that's, that was a situation there as well.
You talk about this like you're ordering lunch. Yeah, I had her cornered. You don't seem to be remorseful about it. You talk about it in a very matter-of-fact way.
I think I'm more sociopathic than I like to admit, to be honest with you.
You've had restraining orders from parents, uncles, ex. You said you've had too many to count.
Yeah, I can't count that high, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I actually read that in the book that you've written about this, and it almost seemed to me like you were bragging about it. There were so many. It's like I've got a big number here, so many I can't even count them.
Well, it's amusing to me, and I have a very morbid sense of humor, clearly.
So what are your triggers? Well, alcohol's one.
Alcohol's a primary trigger, the fuel, we'll say.
Yeah. Jennifer a trigger?
Yes, she has been a trigger for me.
You ever killed anybody?
No, thankfully, I haven't crossed that line, and that's what I want to get across here.
Have you ever hurt anyone?
I've hurt people, I guess, in relation to what we're discussing here. But you know, in general, I've tried to keep to myself so I can avoid doing any more damage.
When we come back, John says when he was a teenager, he created a secret compartment in his closet. Well, what was that for? He'll tell us when we come back.
I actually created a separate compartment to this walk-in closet where I fantasized maybe keeping somebody there. And I bought a ninja sword, basically, razor sharp. There was this particular female, and I imagined beheading her with a sword.
And later,
I recognized that he was a monster, one of the most evil serial killers the world's ever known.
you describe him as a father figure.
Yeah, that's the best I could do in my life.
You guys formed a bond.
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil. Accused of faking pregnancies. What happened after she stormed off stage?
She allegedly faked her own death.
Did she turn on her former friend?
You say your daughter received a message that said you will pay for what your mom did.
Plus,
I was a victim of sextortion.
she sent over 1,000 explicit pictures of herself.
And you kept taking and seeing the pictures. Why?
That's tomorrow.
At least once a day, I have this type of demonic thinking where I want to make certain people safe friends. A safe friend is somebody who can't leave or betray you, because you have them always. We could watch them. Unfortunately, to do that, you'd have to end their life. To mitigate this urge, I started to collect random shrunken heads and replica human faces. Having these heads around gave me a sense of peace. There's a tranquility there that comes with permanent friendships.
Well, many of you might think John is making up his thoughts of torture and killing because who thinks in such a disturbing and extreme way? Well, John says thankfully for the past 18 years, he's had a team of doctors helping him with his urges. He says one of his fantasies almost came true when an unsuspected visitor knocked on his door. Take a look.
These fantasies of keeping people with me have been around since I was 16 and 17. When we moved into our new house, I actually created a separate compartment to this walk-in closet where I fantasized maybe keeping somebody there. For instance, these Jehovah's Witnesses who would visit. There was this particular female that I visited several times, and I envisioned keeping her there. If I couldn't keep her, then at least part of her to remember her by. If, hypothetically, I were to keep any part of somebody, it would be the head, because the head is the essence of the person. I imagined beheading her with a sword. I bought the sword, and it was a ninja sword, basically, razor sharp. At one point, I went to the Jehovah's Witnesses hall there. I tried to get her to come back with me. It just got more frustrating. Eventually, I scared her away, and I never saw her again.
When you think back on that, do you think that but for some things not falling in place, you may have actually acted on this?
There was a point one night when I did go searching for a woman I had seen, a streetwalker, and I tried to go find her after having a few drinks. And at the time, the motivation was to take at least part of her home, basically the head. But thankfully, I didn't take that path. I never ran into her.
And knowing that drinking is a real flammable thing for you, why do you continue to drink?
It's a compulsion, for one thing, and another thing, it does help with the anxiety.
So you're likely to murder someone if you drink, but at least you would be calm.
Yeah, I try to maintain a minimum amount if I drink, but, you know, obviously it makes no sense. It's insanity. I recognize it's illogical thinking.
Were you drunk when you held the knife to the girlfriend's throat that ordered the wrong Chinese food?
Yes, every time I've done something like that, I've been drinking.
We actually have a statement. John tried to kill me twice. He was angered by the fact that I ordered the wrong type of Chinese takeout, and I wasn't taking him seriously when he was telling me that government tried to kill him by poisoning him. He held a knife to my throat and told me he knows how to cut my head off and kill me, but I am not an anonymous person. In the same weekend, he put his hands on my neck and told me he knows how to kill me by snapping my neck, but decided against it. He even corresponded with a serial killer, Arthur Shawcross, who told him he has to kill.
Yes, my friend, former friend, the late Arthur Shawcross, who I wrote the book about the Shawcross letters, my journey into the mind of evil. He was basically my closest friend for a while, and I looked up to him as almost a father figure.
You actively seek out this monstrous serial killer, form a relationship with him, get a career into what you call murder memorabilia, gore porn, these are your terms to describe this, and this relationship with this horrific human being. How is that not nurturing and flourishing this part of who you are as opposed to suppressing it?
Well, first off, I recognize that he was a monster, and he admitted that he was evil. I agree, one of the most evil serial killers the world's ever known. But
you describe him as a father figure.
yeah, that's the best I could do in my life.
You picked this guy?
Well, he wrote to me, and we developed a relationship from that.
Well, he wrote to you because you were doing things in reference to him, and he saw these things,
Well,
right?
exactly. I was selling some of his artwork at the time.
You were peddling some of his trash.
That's true. That's true. At the time, I was, back when you could sell this type of thing on eBay.
And your handle was Sawman.
Yes, sir.
And so he writes to you and says, hey, great handle. I've killed a few with machetes.
Yes, he has told me that.
You guys formed a bond.
We did form a bond, yes, a very close one at that.
So tell me about that bond. What was it that made you kindred spirits?
He seemed very encouraging in a positive way for me, and in the sense that he seemed to have respect for me where few other people did. So I appreciated that.
What was it he respected about you?
Basically, we had a similar line of thinking.
Which was?
In the sense of wanting to maybe do away with certain people.
And you both wanted to collect heads?
Basically, yes.
Of human beings?
Yes, that's true.
You realized if he had the chance, he might cut your head off.
I was never afraid of that, to be honest.
Of course he was in prison.
No, but still, he was mostly into women.
Yeah. When we come back, John says that he has triggers that could make him become a monster, but one of those triggers is alcohol. We've talked about that. Another one of his triggers is his sister. We're going to meet her next.
Blood is very important to me. I've had thoughts of bathing in blood. A time I actually did get to somewhat bathe in blood was with my best friend. We ritually sliced each other, and we would put some of that blood in our cocktails and kind of smear it all over each other. And it became a frenzy to the point where the next day the apartment was caked in blood. It's more exciting to me to bathe in blood than anything else. It's a high beyond anything else I've done, and I've done a lot of substances.
There are two triggers that bring out the monster in him: alcohol and his younger sister, Jennifer, whom he hasn't seen in over 6 months. Let's hear what she has to say.
When John was young, he always talked about his fascination with killing and serial killers. We had drawings on his table with blood mixed in and heads chopped off, severed limbs and heads, and like things sewed back together. I honestly thought I would find a severed head in the closet. I've never been scared of John, but I'm definitely afraid of him when he starts drinking. One time, John got completely drunk. I had my son in my arms, and he just out of nowhere pulled out a knife and kind of cornered us. There was this like Crocodile Dundee knife he had. It was literally like a 12-inch blade he had pointed towards us. He was rambling. He wasn't making any sense. It was clear to me that he was wanting to kill someone or was just having like this desire or a need to be violent at the time. So I just had to talk my way out of it. One time I had to come over and clean up blood because him and his friend had been stabbing each other in some drunken, drugged state. And there was literally blood all over the bottom of the bed, like all over the floor. It took me like hours to clean up this blood, and I just used basically straight bleach on it, old rags I could find. It was like a crime scene. As a kid, I had nightmares of cleaning up after him and covering up after a murder for him. So it just felt like I was reliving that. There have been so many crazy things that he has done that I'm almost numb to it. I don't ever want to believe that he could actually follow through and kill anyone. But if one day I found out that John murdered somebody, I definitely wouldn't be surprised.
Jennifer, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
One of the things you said is that you believe that at this point, he is cured.
I mean, I don't know about cured 100%, but I do worry about his, drug and alcohol, issue as well, and I would hope that he doesn't have these urges anymore the way that he did years back, and I definitely was concerned about his relationship with Shawcross because I felt like he was giving him ideas.
Are you aware that he sees you as a trigger?
It's kind of like something that is a little bit of a surprise to me to hear that, but at the same time, I do feel that he is resentful of certain things with me. So he's definitely resentful.
And you say that the childhood that you shared with him was traumatic.
It was, yes.
According to John and Jennifer, there was violence. They were beaten, hit, called names, slept on bloody mattress. 3 a.m., just wake up, random chores to do for John. At 6 years old, you were left alone with your younger sister. At 10, your parents separated.
Yes, sir.
And you felt very much abandoned.
I did feel abandoned, definitely left behind for certain.
You say the perpetrator of this was your father.
Yes, sir.
And we have a statement from your father. He says, John, in my opinion, there was no abuse. Sorry you feel the way you do about your upbringing, John. But as a young parent, I did what I thought was the best I could do to get you ready for the outside world to be a success, which looks like I did something right. I may not have been perfect, and no parent is. I love you, Dad.
I feel like he has matured over the years, and he was a younger parent then, so I don't have any ill will for him.
Well, I want to be real clear about something, because you said, and I'm quoting now, that you think your brother is, quote, cured because of all the work he has done on himself. But John says you don't realize he is still having these urges, and that it is a battle every day.
I didn't realize he was still having those same urges to kill that he used to
Well, I
have.
want you to know that. Well, coming up, John says he was always fascinated by serial killers, but only the ones that collected body parts. He'll tell us about that next.
I formed a relationship with one of the world's most evil serial killers, Arthur Shawcross. He's killed at least 14 people, and he did cannibalize women. I could empathize with that. We had a bond that few have to hunt humans. Having bought a pair of handcuffs and shackles for the legs, I would shackle myself to practice being in them in case I was ever arrested. You can't move too quickly. You'll hurt your ankles and you hurt your hands. I assumed, with the mindset I had, that I would be spending a lot of time in prison. Because I happen to own the shackles and handcuffs, I have used them on 2 people that I can recall. The blackouts I had, who knows, maybe there's more.
Well, for a living, John traded grisly collectibles on the internet like a real body bag and a fake severed limb. But what was really in demand was serial killer artwork. So using the nickname Sawman, John began to buy and trade this type of art. Now, while doing this, Sawman got the attention of one of America's most notorious serial killers, whose weapon of choice was, you guessed it, a saw. Take a look.
Around the year 2000, I formed a relationship with one of the world's most evil serial killers, Arthur Shawcross. And I had been selling his artwork on eBay, and so we just formed a business relationship, and it became a very close friendship, and I call it a brotherhood of ghouls. Arthur Shawcross is known as a Genesee River Killer, and he's killed at least 14 people.
Rochester police have been called in for what may be the 13th victim in a string of homicides.
FBI and police think it's at least 19. He's told me it's a lot more than that. Writing to him was a form of therapy for me, and unwittingly, he was like a demon therapist for me. One aspect of Shawcross's crimes was that he did cannibalize some of these women. I feel it was his way of connecting to these people, and I could understand that and empathize with that. Even though Shawcross was a notorious serial killer, he was kinder to me and more fatherly to me than even my own biological father. We had a bond. It's a very exotic strain of deviance that few have to hunt humans. There's few people who could see eye to eye with that.
A very exotic strain of deviance. That just seems to glamorize a very sick sort of thing. Here's an excerpt from the book. Shawcross still never made me regret my eccentric ways, even as family members abandoned me along with all but the most intensively offbeat friends, and there were not many. You just heard what you said back on that tape. You said this was a very exotic form of deviance, hunting humans.
Yes, it is, again, a very rare frequency of thought. And
that's not what you said. You said it's exotic.
I consider it an exotic form of evil, we'll say.
Clearly, Shawcross is not a role model. I mean, he's in prison for arson for 5 years, murder, 2 children for 25 years. He serves, what, half of that? They'll let him out because they say he's not a threat anymore. He then is convicted of killing 12 women, gets 250 years. He says he kills for revenge. Cannibalism, misogynistic, he's racist, he has no remorse. And
well, the thing is,
this is the guy that you say is a good friend.
I mean, I admit it's beyond bizarre, and I don't mean to glorify it. It's very difficult to find people I could relate to, obviously, you know. And it's something
it's
something I'm dealing with.
When I was, you know, when we were living together, when I was younger, I used to be afraid to, you know, like I said, look in his closet. I thought I would find a severed head. I honestly believed that. I thought he was really capable of that. I would have nightmares about helping them cover up dead bodies.
Well, you talk about collecting. These are real people. These are, you know, Shawcross victims. If you look at his victims, look at these. These are human beings. These are real people.
I agree with you. I've been going through a healing process.
They have friends. They have dreams. Coming up, Shawcross met his long-lost daughter 8 years before he died. He confessed things to her that he never told police, and she's here today. We're going to meet her next.
Arthur Shawcross does have a daughter, and I've never met her or spoken to her, but she used to visit him in the Sullivan Correctional Facility. Sometimes I am curious as to whether Shawcross meant as much to his daughter as he meant to me, but I truly do hope she doesn't know as much about him as I do, because it's terrifying.
Well, in 2000, Shawcross discovered that he had a long-lost 31-year-old daughter, Maggie. Now, Maggie says at the time she was looking for a missing link in her life. She says, of course, it was beyond a shock to discover her father was a serial killer, but she wanted to get to know him anyway. Now, Maggie says her father spoke of John, but she never met him or read any of the letters her father wrote to him until today. So you two have never met?
No.
Correct.
But your father did speak of him.
Oh, absolutely.
What did he tell you about him?
He was very vague when it came to his correspondences, so I really didn't go into it. I didn't press him.
When you were looking for your father, he had not been in your life for what reason?
Well, I was raised by a different man.
Right.
When the man that had raised me as dad, he passed away. My mother told me 2 months after his passing.
Right. So you thought he was your biological father?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so only when he passed did you find out he was not, and you were how old then?
I was 31.
When you found out that he was, in fact, one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Take me through that moment.
It was a flooring moment. I embraced it. I had to, because there was somebody out there that was connected to me. Yeah. So I had to embrace it.
So you went to see him?
Yes, I did. Not right away.
Right. And how did that first meeting go?
I walked in, and there was a guard behind me, and he walked into the room. I thought he was going to be behind the glass, and he was larger than life, larger than life. And he said hello, and I said, "Hi, Dad," and then we sat down.
Did you ever ask him why he did what he did with his? No, no.
I wanted him to come to that bridge when he felt it was necessary to tell me.
He did write letters to this gentleman here. On July 19th of 2000, he wrote, "Hello, John. You can call me Art if you want. The stationery you chose is quite good. Reminds me of someone I knew one time. Tied up, blindfolded, and gagged is good. My specialty is the keyhole saw. It's what I used on 3 victims." So he sends that to you, and you're comfortable with it. He did get into detail with you at some point, right?
Yes, he did.
And he told you about one of his victims that he had dismembered, correct?
Yes.
And he, in fact, had cannibalized this woman.
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you about that?
He was fascinated with the genitalia, so to speak. And he didn't elaborate it in letters, but when we spoke one-on-one, it was in hushed tones, and it was graphic. But I never get shocked that easy. I never do. But he said that he was fascinated by it because it was the opening to life. That was his exact words, the opening to life. He would discuss certain things with my children, my older children, not my younger ones. And my son had expressed that he wanted to be in the military. And Arthur had turned around and said to him, "Oh, do you know what human flesh tastes like?" So my son said, "Yeah, I would like to know what human flesh tastes like. What does it taste like?" He said, "Roast pork." Never ate it again.
But one of Shawcross' victims, one of the men that you consider your friend, your father figure's victims, was a little boy named Jack. And I want to humanize the victims of these heinous crimes, so we're going to hear from one of Jack's relatives when we come back.
Maria Welch disappeared from the Lyle Avenue area November 6th. She leaves behind a 7-month-old son and the baby's father, Jim Miller.
We can lay her to rest and know that she's not laying out in some snowbank covered with snow and ice.
Miller says he feels nothing but rage for Shawcross, who has not been charged with Welch's murder, but whose sources say led police to her body.
Now you see what he's done to these human beings that live from day to day.
Well, that was one of Shawcross' many victims. In 1972, 10-year-old Jack Blake was Shawcross' first victim. Now, he lured the little boy into the woods and then murdered him. Now, Jack's family never got justice because his murder was used as a bargaining tool for Shawcross' confession of murdering another child. So on Skype today, Jack's older sister, Robin, joins us and is going to tell us a little bit about Jack.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. He was 1 year younger than me. We were best friends. He was kind to everybody. He tried to help people. I fell through the ice in the river, and I was trying to get my way back up and, to a solid piece of ice. What my brother Jack did, he got on his stomach and he scooched over. He grabbed my jacket with one hand and he took me right out of that river. And, that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today.
So how long after that was it that Arthur Shawcross took him into the woods and murdered him?
It was that following spring.
He had lured Jack and Peter into going fishing with him, right?
Yes, he did.
And they got uncomfortable, and at one point they got away. And as I understand it, Shawcross got his hands on Peter and grabbed him and held him up over his head and told Jack, "You either come back or I'm going to hurt your brother."
Yes.
So again, Jack comes back to save his brother.
He did.
And for it, he lost his life.
The way I found out that he was even, you know, that they found his body, my brother's body, was over the TV station. Mm-hmm. And then that's just, I lost it. It's just horrible that he could, any person, that monster could do that to my little brother. See, there's my brother. I love you, Jack.
This is what's left behind when these urges take over. Whatever payoff you got from befriending and creating this exotic brotherhood with this monster is misguided, disrespectful, and an abomination to this woman and to this child.
I want to get it straight that I have come out on the other side of all that. That's the point of the book, too, to explain that. Shawcross letters.
Well, I want that. I want you to make that clear.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
All right. Robin, thank you so much. I'm very proud to have just a moment to honor your brother, Jack.
Thank you so much.
So should the public be afraid of John? Should his sister and her children be afraid of John? My thoughts about that when we come back. I want to be very clear. You've done some atypical, eccentric, I think mentally unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy behaviors in your life. But at this point, you've never hurt anyone against their will. You've never killed anybody. You've never done anything of that nature.
That's true.
I want to be very clear about that.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
You've also sought help for this.
Yes.
You've put yourself in outpatient programs, very intense outpatient programs.
Yes.
And you've been forthcoming about this, and I often say you can't change what you don't acknowledge, and you've acknowledged this, and that's a big step.
Yes, sir.
If your relationship with your sister is a trigger, then you need to resolve that to the point that you desensitize yourself to her as a trigger. And you should not be alone with this man, with yourself and your children, unless and until an independent professional tells you that it is safe to do so. Okay? Just belt and suspenders. Do I think that he would transgress against you? I would tell you probably not.
Right.
But as a mother, you don't have the right to take that chance.
Right.
So if you want to see your brother, see him in a public place or with someone around until a professional tells you that you're no longer a trigger for him.
Right. And will that ever happen?
Yes, it certainly could happen because he's acknowledged it.
Yeah.
The fact that he's put it up on the table as an issue,
right.
The prognosis is very good that can happen. You would do yourself a great service if you would sign a letter and permit your therapist to speak with her when she requests it.
Yeah.
So she has the opportunity for them to talk to her about how you're doing.
That makes sense, sir.
And she can't unless you give your permission. And if you do that, then they can tell her, you know, right now he's in a rocky place. I wouldn't do this, or I think he's in a good place. You guys can go to dinner or whatever. I give her the opportunity for them to check in, and that's another accountability. So
yes.
I would do that.
Yes, sir.
Fair enough?
Yes, fair enough.
Fair enough.
Sir.
Maggie, thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much.
John, thank you. I want to thank all my guests today for sharing their story. For more information,